When a storm turns into a nightmare and a fire threatens to tear a family apart, the courage of Charlie, an old Labrador, proves that love can overcome even the fiercest flames. A story of sacrifice, heroism and the strength of the ties that bind us together. The sun was slowly setting over the lined houses of Crestwood, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink that were reflected in the windows of the quiet suburb. Emily Henderson adjusted the badge on her gas station uniform as she watched Sam, her 7-year-old son, stroke the gray head of Charlie, the family's old Labrador. The dog, with his gentle brown eyes and muzzle already whitened by age, rested peacefully next to the boy on the worn-out sofa in the living room. "Remember the rules, darling?" Emily asked, checking her bag once more. The night shift always made her anxious, especially on nights when the regular babysitter couldn't come. "Mrs. Rodriguez is right next door if you need anything, and you have the number your work number on the fridge," Sam added, his blue eyes fixed on the drawing he was scribbling. "And I'm not supposed to open the door to anyone, not even if I say I know you." Emily smiled, but the smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Ever since Robert had left them 3 years ago, each trip to work was marked by a mixture of need and guilt. The salary from the convenience store barely covered the bills, but the tips from the night shift made up the difference at the end of the month. "Charlie will look after you, won't you, boy?" she stroked the Labrador's ears, who responded with a lazy wag of his tail. Charlie had been a gift from Robert when Sam was born, picked up as a puppy from a local shelter. Now, at the age of 8, he was more than a pet. He was the family's silent guardian, especially on nights like that. While arranging the blanket over Sam, Emily noticed the first drops of rain hitting the window. The news had warned of an approaching storm, but she couldn't afford to miss work. Not when the rent was due. "Can I stay up until you get back?" Sam asked, his small voice carrying that childlike hope that always broke her heart. "You know you can't, champ. There's school tomorrow, and Mrs. Peterson doesn't like it when you sleep through math class." She leaned over to kiss his forehead, inhaling the smell of children's shampoo in his brown hair. "But I promise we'll make pancakes for breakfast tomorrow, how's that?" Sam nodded, although his face showed the familiar disappointment. Emily swallowed the lump in her throat as she picked up her umbrella. Charlie got up from the sofa, following her to the door as he did every evening, his robust body moving with the calm dignity that came with age. "Take care of our boy, Charlie," she whispered, crouching down to hug the dog's furry neck. Charlie responded by gently licking her cheek, a gesture that always seemed to say, "Leave it to me." Outside, the wind was starting to blow harder, shaking the branches of the trees that lined the street. Emily hesitated for a moment on the balcony, watching through the living room window as Sam and Charlie settled back on the sofa. The scene was so familiar, their small son nestled against the golden fur of their Labrador, both illuminated by the soft light of the lamp. The old wiring in the house crackled as thunder rumbled in the distance. Emily made a mental note to ask the owner to check the wiring again, although she knew he would probably ignore the request, as he always did. Adjusting the strap of her bag, she descended the porch steps and walked towards her old Honda Civic. As she maneuvered out of the garage, Emily couldn't have known that this ordinary night in Crestwood was about to turn into a nightmare. That the approaching storm would bring more than just rain and thunder. That in the next few hours, Charlie's love and loyalty would be tested in a way that no one could have predicted. The Labrador watched the car drive away through the window, his attentive and protective stance never wavering. Next to him, Sam was beginning to yawn, his eyes heavy with sleep. The clock on the wall read 7:45 p.m. and the storm was approaching Crestwood, bringing with it a darkness that would change their lives forever. The storm intensified over Crestwood, turning what had begun as a gentle drizzle into a furious curtain of water. Inside the Hendersons' house, Sam fought sleep as he watched his favorite cartoons, his small body still pressed against Charlie's soft fur. The Labrador kept a watchful eye on the window, where occasional flashes of lightning lit up the dark sky. "Charlie," Sam murmured, his fingers absent-mindedly playing with the dog's ear, "do you think Mom will be okay in this rain?" The Labrador turned his head, touching the boy's face with his damp muzzle in silent assurance. It was a gesture that always made Sam smile, even on the loneliest of nights. A particularly loud clap of thunder rattled the windows, and Sam instinctively cringed. Charlie immediately pulled himself together, wrapping his body tighter around the boy. It was something he had learned to do since Sam was a baby, to be not just a guardian, but a safe haven. "Remember when I was scared of thunder, kid?" Sam continued, his small voice almost lost in the noise of the rain. "Not anymore." "Well, just a little." He smiled, remembering how, a few years ago, he used to run to his parents' bed during storms. Now, with Charlie by his side, his fears seemed smaller, more manageable. On the TV, the lights flickered briefly, making Sam hold his breath. The old house had always had electrical problems, something his mother had often mentioned. The familiar smell of ozone from the storm mixed with Charlie's comforting scent, a combination of dog shampoo and that indefinable smell that all Labradors seem to have. Somewhere in the house, a circuit breaker popped. Charlie raised his ears, suddenly alert. His years of experience had made him sensitive to the sounds in the house, and something about that particular click made him uneasy. He got up from the sofa, his paws making a soft noise against the wooden floor as he investigated. "Where are you going?" Sam asked, missing the dog's comforting warmth. "Are you scared of the storm too?" Charlie stopped in the hallway, his snout testing the air. There was something different, a subtle smell that his instincts recognized as danger, even if he couldn't yet fully identify it. He returned to Sam, but remained alert, his muscles tense under his golden fur. "You know what?" Sam began, pulling his favorite blanket closer, the one with the rocket ship print that he had gotten last Christmas. "The teacher asked us to write about our best friend, and I wrote about you." He smiled proudly. "I told how you've been here since I was a baby, and how you always protect me, like a superhero." Charlie tilted his head, his brown eyes fixed on the boy with that absolute attention that only dogs can give. Sam continued, "Some kids laughed because I chose a dog, but the teacher said that sometimes the best friends have 4 legs. He hugged Charlie's neck. "And she's right, isn't she?" A new clap of thunder shook the house, and this time the lights didn't just flicker, they went out completely. Sam let out a small cry of surprise, and Charlie immediately positioned himself closer, his body serving as an anchor in the sudden darkness. "It's okay," Sam whispered, more to himself than to Charlie. "Mom always leaves flashlights in the kitchen drawer." He stood up, his hands groping in the dark. Charlie followed close behind, guiding him gently with nudges of his muzzle. In the kitchen, as Sam searched for the lanterns, Charlie detected that smell again, stronger now, more urgent. His hair stood on end instinctively. Years of evolution and instinct were screaming in his brain, something was wrong. Sam finally found a flashlight, the beam of light cutting through the darkness like a sword. "See, we don't need to be afraid," he declared, trying to sound as brave as his mother always said he was. "Let's go back to the room and—" That's when the first sharp crack came from the wall, followed by an electric sizzle. Charlie barked once, loudly and decisively, something he rarely did. The smell his instincts had detected was now unmistakable, smoke. Before Sam could process what was happening, the lights came back on, not all of them, but in erratic flashes that made the shadows dance on the walls. And with them came the first visible sign of smoke, thin and gray, snaking through an outlet. "Charlie." Sam's voice shook, all his previous bravado disappearing. The Labrador was already on the move, pushing the boy gently towards the front door, his protective instincts taking full control. But before they could reach the exit, a deafening pop came from the kitchen wall, and orange flames burst through the faded wallpaper. The fire, fueled by the house's old wiring and dry wood, spread with terrifying speed. Sam froze, paralyzed with fear. The sudden heat and the sight of the flames turned his feet into lead. Charlie barked again, more urgently this time, but the boy seemed unable to move. Within seconds, the fire created a barrier between them and the front door. The smoke began to thicken, making Sam cough. Charlie knew they needed to move, and fast. But where? His canine brain processed the options in fractions of a second, evaluating escape routes as the fire continued its deadly dance through the house. The storm outside roared on, oblivious to the drama unfolding inside the small house in Crestwood. Somewhere in town, Emily was serving customers at the gas station, unaware that her world was about to be turned upside down. And there, in the midst of the growing chaos, an old Labrador was preparing to prove that love and loyalty can overcome even the fiercest flames. The heat was intensifying by the second, and thick smoke was beginning to take over the second floor. Charlie, with his keen instincts, realized that the situation was deteriorating rapidly. The Labrador grabbed Sam's pajama sleeve with his teeth, pulling him gently but urgently towards the stairs. The boy, still in shock, finally responded to his protector's silent command. "Charlie, I'm scared," Sam whispered, tears starting to run down his face as they climbed the steps. The Labrador stayed close to his side, guiding him through the smoke that was beginning to accumulate. Years of living together had created a unique language between them, and at that moment, every touch of Charlie's muzzle was a silent promise, "I'm here. I won't leave you." Upstairs, Sam remembered his mother's instructions: in the event of a fire, find a room with a window and close it to prevent smoke from entering. With Charlie by his side, he ran to his room, closing the door as soon as they entered. The Labrador immediately went to the window, scratching it with his paws, but the height of the second floor was considerable. A fall would be too dangerous for Sam. "The phone!" Sam exclaimed, remembering the old cell phone her mother had left in her room for emergencies. His hands trembled as he searched for it in the drawer of the bedside table. When he finally found it, cold terror gripped his chest. No signal. The storm had knocked out the cell towers in the area. Charlie watched the door apprehensively. The heat was rising, and thin spirals of smoke were beginning to seep out from under the wood. The Labrador knew they needed help, and fast. It was then that his ears picked up something through the noise of the storm: sirens, still far away, but getting closer. Someone must have seen the fire, Sam thought hopefully, but his relief was short-lived. A crash from the corridor indicated that part of the ceiling had collapsed, possibly blocking the firemen's access to the second floor. Fear returned in full force when he realized they were trapped. Charlie, however, was already formulating a plan. Years of looking after Sam had sharpened not only his protective instincts, but also his intelligence. He knew he had to get help, but he couldn't leave Sam alone for long either. The dilemma tore at his canine heart. "Charlie." Sam's voice was hoarse from the smoke. "I think I heard the firemen." He moved closer to the window, trying to see through the curtain of rain. The sirens were closer now, but still not close enough. It was at that moment that Charlie made his decision. With one last look at Sam, he ran to the door and, using all his weight, managed to open it enough to get through. Smoke immediately invaded the room. "Charlie, no!" Sam shouted, panic evident in his voice. "Please don't leave me." The Labrador's heart squeezed as he heard the fear in his boy's voice, but he knew it was his only chance. He crossed the burning corridor, ignoring the heat burning his paws. He descended the stairs partially destroyed by the fire, each step a battle against the pain and the instinct to return to Sam. Reaching the second floor, Charlie found the back door partially open. The fire had distorted the wood, creating enough of an opening for him to pass through. Within seconds, he was outside, the torrential rain soaking his fur. Without wasting any time, he ran to Mrs. Rodriguez's house, barking as hard as his lungs would allow. His barks, normally calm and controlled, now carried the urgency of his mission. The neighbor, who had already noticed the smoke, ran out when she heard Charlie. "Oh, my God," she screamed as she saw the flames consuming the house. "Sam! Sam!" Charlie kept barking, running back to the burning house. He needed to get back to his little boy. Mrs. Rodriguez was already on the phone to the fire department, confirming that there was a child inside the house. Meanwhile, in the bedroom, Sam had curled up in the corner furthest from the door, the rocket blanket over his head like a makeshift shield against the smoke. His eyes were burning, and each breath was harder than the last. "Please come back, Charlie," he whispered repeatedly, like a prayer. Outside, the first fire trucks turned the corner onto Crestwood Drive, their sirens cutting through the stormy night. Charlie, drenched and panting, watched the first responders approach with anxiety. But he knew his mission wasn't complete, not while Sam was still inside. Ignoring Mrs. Rodriguez's cries for him to stay where he was, the old Labrador prepared to do the unthinkable, go back inside the burning house. His instincts told him that the firemen might not arrive in time, and years of unconditional devotion to Sam outweighed any instinct for self-preservation. With a determination that only true love can inspire, Charlie took a deep breath and ran back to the house, disappearing into the smoke screen. He had made a silent promise to Emily years ago, and nothing, not even the inferno consuming the house, would stop him from keeping it. The night was far from over, and Charlie's true test of courage was just beginning. As the firemen positioned their hoses and the neighborhood gathered under the storm, an old Labrador once again climbed the burning stairs, guided only by his unconditional love and the desperate need to protect his little human. The smoke was a thick black curtain when Charlie reached the second floor again. His paws, already burnt from the first descent, protested with every step on the glowing carpet. The Labrador ignored the stabbing pain, guiding himself mainly by smell and muscle memory. His eyes were of little use in the toxic darkness. In Sam's room, the situation had deteriorated dramatically. The boy, still wrapped in his firecracker blanket, had crawled under the bed, seeking the last possible refuge from the heat and smoke seeping in from all sides. His breathing came in short, painful gasps, each inhalation bringing more smoke than oxygen into his tiny lungs. "Charlie," his voice was just a hoarse whisper now, almost lost in the crackle of the flames devouring the house. The Labrador pushed open the bedroom door with his snout, his heart racing as he saw that the flames were already licking the walls of the hallway. The heat was so intense that it was melting the hanging picture frames, making the happy photographs of simpler times squirm and blacken. Charlie located Sam immediately, the bond between them was so strong that he could find him anywhere. Bending down, he crawled under the bed, his sturdy body barely passing through the narrow space. The relief in Sam's eyes at seeing him was like a ray of light cutting through all that darkness. "You're back," Sam sobbed, hugging the dog's neck. "I knew you'd come back." A deafening crash shook the house. Another section of the ceiling had collapsed in the hallway. Charlie knew they didn't have much time. Gently but firmly, he began to pull Sam by the sleeve of his pajamas, trying to guide him out of hiding. Outside, the firefighters were battling the weather and the elements. The storm was raging, turning the job of fighting the flames into an even more complex battle. Captain Anderson, a 20-year veteran of the fire department, coordinated the operation with controlled urgency. "We have confirmation of a child on the second floor," he informed his team over the radio. "And apparently a dog has gotten back inside. We need immediate access." Mrs. Rodriguez, now sheltering under an umbrella along with other neighbors who had gathered, couldn't hold back her tears. "Charlie, he's always been so protective of Sam," she explained to a reporter who had arrived on the scene. "Since the boy's father left, that dog has become much more than a pet." Inside the bedroom, Charlie had managed to get Sam out from under the bed, but now they faced a new dilemma. The flames had reached the door, turning it into a curtain of fire. The only possible exit was the window, but the height was still too dangerous an obstacle. It was then that Charlie had an idea. Running over to the bed, he began to pull at the blanket with his teeth, dragging it to the window. Sam, even through his confusion and fear, understood his friend's plan. "Like a rope?" he asked, his voice breaking through the smoke. Charlie barked once, confirming. With trembling fingers, Sam began to tie the sheets and blankets together, creating a makeshift rope. Years of watching cartoons would finally come in handy. Charlie supervised the work, his eyes alternating between Sam and the door, where the flames were growing ever brighter. Just as Sam finished tying the last knot, an explosion downstairs shook the entire structure of the house. The impact was so strong that it cracked one of the bedroom walls, letting in a gust of wind and rain. The fresh air, instead of bringing relief, only fed the flames, which were now advancing with renewed vigor. Charlie realized that it was now or never. With a strength he didn't know he still possessed, he pushed Sam towards the window, indicating that it was time to use the makeshift rope. The boy hesitated, looking at his faithful friend with eyes wide with fear. "But what about you, Charlie?" The Labrador replied with a soft bark, that same comforting sound he always used to calm Sam during storms. His eyes, even through the smoke, conveyed a clear message: trust me. Sam began to climb down the rope of sheets, his small hands clutching the fabric with all the strength he could muster. The rain pelted his face, mixing with tears and soot. Charlie watched from the window, his heart beating frantically as he saw his little boy descend inch by inch. But fate still had one more test for the old Labrador's mettle. When Sam was halfway down, one of the knots began to unravel. Charlie saw the danger a second before it happened, just enough time to make a decision that would change everything. Without hesitation, he jumped out of the window, his heavy body serving as a counterweight to stabilize the makeshift rope. The pain of the impact was immediate and brutal, but Charlie didn't let out a single yelp. At that moment, all that mattered was keeping Sam safe. The night continued its chaotic symphony of sirens, thunder and the roar of flames, but for Charlie, the only sound that mattered was Sam's gasping breath, still alive, still fighting. The price of loyalty would be high, but for the old Labrador, no sacrifice would be too great to protect his little human. As the firefighters rushed towards him, Charlie kept his eyes fixed on Sam, ignoring the pain spreading through his body. His mission wasn't over yet, not while his little boy needed him. The gas station where Emily worked was strangely silent that stormy night. The merciless rain kept the customers away, creating a monotonous rhythm against the metal roof. It was during this silence that her phone rang, Mrs. Rodriguez's number flashing on the screen. The icy feeling that ran through his body was immediate and overwhelming. Emily. Her neighbor's voice was choked with tears. "Your house. Sam. You need to come now." Emily's world slowed to a stop. Mrs. Rodriguez's next words came as if through a distant tunnel: "Fireman, Charlie." Her hands were shaking so badly that she could barely hold the phone. "Is Sam?" She couldn't complete the question. "The paramedics are with him now." "Charlie, oh, Emily, Charlie saved him, but he's badly hurt." Emily didn't remember leaving the station or getting into her car. The next clear memory was driving through the storm, her hands gripping the steering wheel so hard that her knuckles were white. The rain battered the windshield with brutal force, turning the city lights into watercolor blurs. As he drove, flashbacks invaded his mind: Charlie as a puppy, clumsily running around the house, Charlie lying next to Sam's crib, standing guard, Charlie consoling Sam after Robert's departure. Each memory was a stab in the heart. A few blocks from the house, Emily could already see the orange glow of the flames against the night sky. Fire engines, police cars and an ambulance blocked the street. Her heart stopped when she saw the extent of the fire. The flames were voraciously devouring the second floor of the house, even in the pouring rain. He had barely parked the car when he spotted the small figure wrapped in a metal blanket, sitting in the ambulance. "Sam!" she shouted, running through the rain. Her son raised his head, his soot-stained face lighting up with a smile of relief at the sight of her. "Mommy!" Sam tried to get up, but the paramedic kept him seated, oxygen still flowing through the mask on his face. Emily hugged him tightly, the tears finally breaking through the barrier of shock that was keeping her going. "My love, my baby," she sobbed, examining every inch of her son's face. "Are you all right? Are you hurt?" "Charlie saved me, Mom," Sam said through the oxygen mask, his voice hoarse from the smoke. "He's a real hero." It was then that Emily noticed the absence of the Labrador. "Where's Charlie?" she asked, looking around frantically. One of the paramedics approached, his face grave. "The dog is being taken to the emergency veterinary clinic. He suffered serious burns and possibly inhaled a lot of smoke. What's more, the fall." "What fall?" Emily interrupted, her heart squeezing even harder. Sam started crying again. "He jumped out of the window with me, Mom. To help me down. He saved me." A few meters away, an emergency veterinary team was frantically working on Charlie's still body. The Labrador had lost consciousness shortly after ensuring that Sam was safe. His paws were severely burned, and a dark stain was spreading across his right side, where he had absorbed the impact of the fall. "We need to move him now," one of the vets ordered. "He's going into shock." Emily watched helplessly as they loaded Charlie into the veterinary ambulance. The golden fur that Sam loved to stroke was blackened by smoke and stained with blood. The siren sounded again, cutting through the night as the vehicle set off towards the clinic. Mrs. Rodriguez approached, placing an umbrella over Emily and Sam. "I saw everything," she said softly. "Charlie came out of the burning house to warn us, and then he went back for Sam. I've never seen anything like it in my life." The firemen were still fighting the flames that were consuming the house. Captain Anderson approached the group, removing his helmet. "Mrs. Henderson. We need to talk about what happened." The probable cause was a short circuit in the old wiring, aggravated by the storm. But Emily was barely listening. Her gaze was fixed on the direction in which the veterinary ambulance had disappeared, carrying Charlie. All the money she had saved to fix the wiring hadn't been enough. And now Charlie, his faithful protector, was paying the price. "He'll be all right, won't he, Mom?" Sam asked, her voice small and frightened. "Charlie's strong. He's always been strong." Emily hugged her son tighter, feeling the tremor in his little body. The rain continued to fall, washing the tears from their faces, while the house they called home continued to burn behind them. But at that moment, all that mattered was that Sam was alive, thanks to the unwavering devotion of an old Labrador who had turned protection into heroism. "Let's go to the clinic," Emily decided, her voice finding strength in the need to act. "Charlie needs us now, just as much as we need him." The Crestwood community watched in silence as mother and son climbed into the car, leaving behind the smoking wreckage of their home. The night wasn't over yet, and Charlie's fate hung by a thread as fragile as the love that had driven him to risk everything to save his little human. The emergency veterinary clinic was a small white building on the outskirts of Crestwood, its fluorescent lights creating a diffuse halo through the persistent rain. Emily held Sam against her chest as they walked through the automatic doors, the distinctive smell of antiseptic replacing the odor of smoke that still clung to their clothes. The receptionist, a middle-aged woman called Nancy, looked up as they entered. Recognition was immediate. The emergency team had already called to report the case of the hero Labrador. "Mrs. Henderson." Nancy called out softly. "Charlie is being attended to by Dr. Martinez now. Please have a seat. As soon as there's any news, you'll be the first to know." Emily guided Sam to one of the plastic chairs in the waiting room. The boy was still shivering slightly, either from shock or from the cold of his wet clothes. His eyes were fixed on the door leading to the treatment area, as if he could make Charlie appear just by the force of his will. "Mom," Sam whispered after a few minutes of silence, "do you think Charlie was scared?" Emily swallowed the lump in her throat. "I think he was more worried about you than scared, darling. But he hates loud noises," Sam continued, his small hands twitching in his lap. "Remember how he hides during fireworks? And yet he came back for me." The door to the treatment area opened, and they both straightened up in their chairs. But it was only a veterinary technician coming out with a clipboard. The clock on the wall ticked 23:45, each tick echoing in the almost empty room. Emily closed her eyes for a moment, letting the memories wash over her. Charlie had been an unexpected present from Robert, turning up at the house the day after Sam was born. "Every baby needs a protector," Robert had said, holding the fussy little boy. At the time, Emily found the idea a little too romantic. Now, the words carried a different weight. "Mrs. Henderson." Emily opened her eyes. Dr. Martinez was standing in front of her, still wearing his surgical coat. His face was grave, but his eyes were kind. "Charlie is stable for the time being," he began, choosing his words carefully. "But I'll be honest, the situation is delicate. He suffered severe burns to his paws and the right side of his body. The smoke inhalation compromised his lungs, and the impact of the fall caused some fractures." Sam squeezed Emily's hand tightly. "But he'll be fine, won't he, doctor?" The vet crouched down in front of Sam, leveling his gaze with the boys. "Charlie is one of the bravest dogs I've ever met. And brave dogs are also very strong. We're going to do everything we can to help him." "How much?" Emily hesitated, her voice breaking. "How much will the treatment cost?" Dr. Martinez exchanged a glance with Nancy, who was already on the phone. "Don't worry about that now, Mrs. Henderson. The community is already mobilizing. Charlie's story is spreading fast." As if to confirm her words, Emily's cell phone vibrated with a message. It was a link to an online fundraising page created by Mrs. Rodriguez. The text read, "Help the hero of Crestwood, Charlie, the Labrador who risked everything to save a child from a fire. Can I see him?" Sam asked, his voice small but hopeful. Dr. Martinez hesitated. "He's sedated now, and we need to keep him under constant observation. But," he smiled softly, "maybe we can arrange a short visit tomorrow, if he's more stable. What do you think?" Sam nodded, although his eyes were watery. "Doctor? Can he hear if I send him a message?" "I'm sure he will," the vet replied. "What do you want to tell him?" Sam closed his eyes for a moment, as if gathering his courage. "I want to tell him that he's the best friend in the world. And that he needs to be strong, because we still have a lot of cartoons to watch together. And," her voice faltered, "I want to tell him that I love him very much." Emily pulled Sam into a tight hug, her own tears finally falling. Dr. Martinez sniffled, visibly moved, before promising to pass on the message. Outside, the storm was beginning to subside, but inside the clinic, the night would be long. Emily settled into the uncomfortable chair, Sam nestled against her chest, both of them silently watching over the bravest member of their little family. Nancy occasionally brought cups of hot chocolate and updates on the rapidly growing fundraising campaign. Charlie's story had touched hearts beyond Crestwood, spreading across social media like a beacon of hope in difficult times. And in the intensive care room, monitored by machines and surrounded by care, an old Labrador was fighting his own battle, guided by the same love that had driven him to face the flames. His body was broken, but his spirit, the one that had made him a hero, remained unshaken. The morning arrived quietly at the veterinary clinic, finding Emily and Sam asleep in the reception chairs. Nancy had provided blankets for them during the early hours, and now the rising sun painted soft shadows through the shutters. A sudden movement at the door roused Emily. Her heart raced as she recognized the figure standing in the doorway, Robert, her ex-husband, still wearing the same crumpled dress clothes from work the day before. "I came as soon as I saw the news," he said softly, so as not to wake Sam. His eyes were red and tired, suggesting a long night's drive from Washington, D.C. to Crestwood. "How is he?" Emily gently settled Sam in the chair before getting up. "Stable, but critical," she replied, her voice a controlled whisper. "The next 48 hours will be decisive." Robert ran his hand through his gray hair, a nervous gesture that Emily recognized well from their years of marriage. I remember the day I brought Charlie home, he murmured, more to himself than to her. It was snowing, and he was just a little golden ball shivering in his car seat. The comment triggered a memory that Emily had kept in the back of her mind. It was a winter's afternoon, 3 days after Sam's birth. Emily was exhausted, trying to adapt to the new routine with a newborn, when Robert came home with a puppy wrapped in his coat. He was alone in the shelter, Robert explained at the time, as the little Labrador shyly explored his new surroundings. All the other puppies in the litter had already been adopted. The volunteer said he was special, that he had something different in his eyes. "Robert, we can barely look after a baby," Emily protested, although her eyes were already fixed on the puppy's clumsy movements. "Trust me," he replied, taking the puppy on his lap. "Every boy needs a best friend. And something tells me this little guy is going to be more than that, he's going to be a guardian." Back in the present, Emily watched Robert approach the sleeping Sam. "The house," he began. "Total loss," she added. "The insurance should cover some of it, but—" "I'll help with everything," Robert interrupted. "I've already spoken to my bank. And I'm going to transfer money to cover Charlie's veterinary costs." Emily felt a complex mixture of emotions, gratitude, sadness, a twinge of old anger. "We don't have to." "Please, Emily," he interrupted her again, his voice breaking slightly. "I know I haven't been the father Sam deserves. I know I disappeared when things got difficult. But Charlie," he swallowed, "Charlie never abandoned you. He did what I should have done, he protected our family at all costs." Sam began to stir, his eyes slowly opening. For a moment, he was confused to see his father there, as if he wasn't sure if he was dreaming. "Dad?" "Hi, champ," Robert smiled, although his eyes were watery. "I've come to see how you and Charlie are." Sam straightened up in his chair, suddenly more alert. "Charlie's a hero, Dad. He saved me. Just like those dogs in the movies we used to watch together, remember?" Robert nodded, sitting down next to his son. "Yes, I do. I remember when I brought him home, thinking he'd be the perfect dog for you. I don't think I ever imagined how right I was." Dr. Martinez chose that moment to appear, his features tired but hopeful. "Good morning," he greeted, noting Robert's presence with a nod. "Charlie had a difficult night, but he's responding well to treatment. The burns are severe, but we've managed to stabilize his breathing." "Can we see him now?" Sam asked anxiously. The vet hesitated for a moment, looking at Emily for approval. She nodded slightly. "For a few minutes," he agreed. "But I need you to understand, Charlie is very badly hurt. He's hooked up to a lot of equipment, and it can look scary at first." Sam stood up, determined. "I'm not scared. Charlie wasn't afraid to save me, so I won't be afraid to see him." Dr. Martinez led them through the corridor to a special treatment room. Through the glass window, they could see Charlie lying on a padded table, connected to monitors and with bandages covering most of his body. His chest was rising and falling in a regular rhythm, aided by a respirator. Sam pressed his hand against the glass, silent tears streaming down his face. "He looks so tiny like this," he whispered. Robert put one hand on his son's shoulder, while Emily held the other. For a moment, they were united again, no longer as a broken family, but as three people connected by the love of an old Labrador who had given everything to keep his little human safe. "You can talk to him," Dr. Martinez suggested gently. "He may not answer, but I'm sure he can hear." Sam approached the intercom on the wall. "Charlie," his voice shook slightly. "It's me, kid. I'm here. We all are. And you need to get well soon, okay? Because," he sniffled, "because you promised you'd always stay with me, remember? And you never break your promises." In bed, Charlie's ears moved slightly at the sound of the familiar voice, and the heart monitor registered a slight change in his rhythm. It was a small sign, but significant. Even in the darkness of the sedation, Charlie was still responding to his little boy's call. The battle for recovery would be long and difficult, but that morning, surrounded by the love of the family he had protected so bravely, Charlie was no longer alone in his struggle. The days following the fire brought a wave of solidarity that transformed Crestwood. Charlie's story had touched something deep in the heart of the community, reminding everyone of the power of unconditional love and quiet courage. Mrs. Rodriguez had transformed her home into a makeshift donation center. The normally spotless living room was filled with boxes of clothes, toys and household items for Emily and Sam. In the kitchen, a meticulously organized spreadsheet recorded the meals the neighbors took turns preparing. "It's the least we can do," she explained to Emily, who was trying to say thank you through tears. "You're family now. We all are." At Crestwood Primary School, Sam's class had created a mural dedicated to Charlie. Colorful drawings showed the Labrador in a superhero cape, saving his friend from the flames. The teacher, Mrs. Peterson, had used the story to teach about courage and compassion. "Mommy, look!" Sam exclaimed during a visit to the school, pointing to his drawing in the center of the mural. In it, Charlie had angel wings in addition to his hero's cape. Mrs. Peterson said that guardian angels sometimes have 4 legs. The online fundraising campaign had exceeded all expectations. People from all over the country, touched by the Labrador hero's story, contributed what they could. Comments filled the page with messages of support and similar stories of love between humans and their canine companions. Robert, making good on his promise, had taken up temporary residence in a nearby hotel to help with the reconstruction of the house. His connections in the real estate business proved invaluable, and a team of builders was already working on the renovation project. "It's going to be even better than before," he assured Sam during a site visit. And this time, with all new wiring and a fire safety system. But the center of everything remained the veterinary clinic, where Charlie fought his daily battle for recovery. Dr. Martinez had created a special visiting routine, allowing Sam to spend time with his friend every day after school. "Talk to him," the vet encouraged. "The will to recover comes very much from the heart, and Charlie has the strongest heart I've ever seen." On that particular afternoon, while Sam was reading his favorite storybook to Charlie, something extraordinary happened. In the middle of a passage about a brave knight, the Labrador slowly opened his eyes, focusing them on his little human. "Charlie?" Sam whispered, hardly daring to breathe. "Mom. Dad. He's awake." Emily and Robert rushed into the room, finding their son's face lit up with joy. Charlie, still weak and plugged in, had managed to lift his head slightly, his bottom making a gentle movement against the mattress. "Hey, brave boy," Robert approached, his voice breaking. "Welcome back." Dr. Martinez arrived quickly, performing a series of examinations. "That's very good," he smiled, checking his vital signs. "Charlie is showing remarkable strength of recovery. The burns are healing well, and his breathing has improved significantly." "When can he come home?" Sam asked anxiously. "We still need to be patient," the vet explained gently. "But if he keeps progressing like this, maybe in a few weeks." The news of Charlie's awakening spread quickly through the city. That evening, dozens of people gathered in the clinic's parking lot, holding candles and posters of support. Someone had brought a guitar, and soft music filled the night air. From the window of the treatment room, Sam watched the display of affection with amazed eyes. "See that, Charlie? Everyone loves you." The Labrador responded with a look that said more than words could express. His eyes, although tired, shone with the same devoted love as always. Emily watched the scene with a full heart. The tragedy of the fire had brought devastating material losses, but it had also revealed the true wealth they possessed: Charlie's unconditional love, the strength of the community, and even a chance to reconnect with Robert. "You know," Robert commented softly, standing next to her, "when I chose Charlie from that shelter, the volunteer told me something interesting. She said that some dogs are more than pets, they're angels in disguise, sent to teach us about love and loyalty. Emily nodded, watching her son leaning over Charlie, excitedly telling him about all the plans he had for when they returned home. The Labrador's scars, now visible under the bandages, were not marks of trauma, but medals of honor, testaments to a love that knew no bounds. Outside, the community continued its silent vigil, its lights dotting the darkness like earthly stars. And inside the clinic, a family rebuilt by the courage of a dog was beginning to glimpse a new dawn, brighter and stronger than before. Charlie may have been injured, but his spirit remained unshaken. Each day brought small victories, an extra movement, a soft bark, a stronger gleam in his eye. And each victory was celebrated not only by his immediate family, but by an entire city that had learned, through him, the true meaning of heroism. 3 weeks had passed since Charlie's awakening, and each day brought new signs of progress. Dr. Martinez had started a carefully planned physiotherapy program to help the Labrador regain strength in his burned paws. The sessions were challenging, but Charlie faced each one with the same determination that had driven him to face the flames. "He's incredibly resilient," commented Lisa, the veterinary physiotherapist, as she guided Charlie through gentle exercises in the therapy pool. "Most dogs would need much longer to reach this level of recovery." Sam, who had obtained special permission from the school to accompany some sessions, watched his friend's every move intently. "It's because he's magic," he declared with the certainty that only a child can have. Mrs. Peterson said that love is the strongest kind of magic there is. The Hendersons' house was almost ready to welcome them back. Robert had personally supervised every detail of the reconstruction, insisting on the highest safety standards. Sam's bedroom had been recreated exactly as it was before, including the star-spangled wallpaper he loved so much. "But I made one small modification," Robert revealed during a visit to the site. He opened the bedroom door, showing a new addition, a specially designed bed for Charlie, positioned strategically next to Sam's bed. With extra orthopedic support to aid recovery. Emily noticed the tears in her ex-husband's eyes as he explained the details of the furniture. Robert had changed in recent weeks, the trauma of the fire serving as a belated awakening to what really mattered in life. At the clinic, Charlie was beginning to show more of his old self. His eyes followed Sam's every move with that characteristic devotion, and his tail, although still limited in movement, thumped happily whenever the boy arrived for visits. "Look, Charlie!" Sam exclaimed one particularly special afternoon, running into the treatment room. "I won a medal at school." He proudly held up a blue ribbon. "It was because of the essay I wrote about you." The teacher said it was the most beautiful story she'd ever read. Charlie raised his head from the mattress, his ears moving with interest. Sam moved closer, holding up the medal so that the dog could see it better. "But you know what?" the boy continued, his voice becoming softer. "You deserve a much bigger medal than this. You're the bravest hero in the whole world." As if responding to the comment, Charlie did something that surprised everyone. With a visible effort, he stood up on his 4 legs for the first time since the fire. His limbs were shaking with the effort, but his eyes were fixed on Sam, full of determination. "Dr. Martinez." Emily called out, thrilled. "Come and see this." The vet arrived quickly, observing the scene with a broad smile. "Well, it looks like someone's more than ready to go home." The news of Charlie's discharge spread quickly through Crestwood. The community, which had stuck together throughout his recovery, immediately began preparations for a special celebration. On the day he was due to leave the clinic, a surprise was waiting outside. The street was decorated with banners and balloons, and a crowd had gathered to welcome the local hero. Children from Sam's school held colorful posters, and even the fire department was present, with Captain Anderson at the head. In recognition of extraordinary courage and devotion, the captain announced solemnly, approaching Charlie with something in his hands, "The Crestwood Fire Department is honored to award Charlie Henderson the Medal of Valor, the highest award for bravery in our city." Sam helped place the medal around Charlie's neck, who sat dignifiedly, as if he understood the importance of the moment. The afternoon sun made the metal shine against his fur, now marked by scars that told a story of love and sacrifice. "Shall we go home, Charlie?" Sam asked softly, kneeling down next to the Labrador. Charlie responded with a soft bark, his first since the fire, and began to walk slowly alongside his boy. Each step was a small triumph, a victory over the flames that had tried to separate them. Emily and Robert followed close behind, watching the pair with full hearts. The tragedy that had almost destroyed their lives had, ironically, helped rebuild their family in a way they had never imagined possible. As they walked down the decorated street, to applause and smiles, Charlie kept his step steady, guided by the love that had always defined him. The scars on his body were now marks of honor, silent witnesses to a universal truth, that true love knows no limits, fears no danger, and always, always finds its way home. The first night in the rebuilt house brought a mixture of emotions for everyone. The smell of fresh paint and new wood still hung in the air, but there was something else, a sense of new beginnings, of renewed possibilities. Charlie explored each room slowly, his paws making a soft sound against the new floor, recognizing familiar spaces in their new guise. Sam wouldn't let go of the Labrador, following his every step like a little shadow. "Look, Charlie, your corner in the kitchen looks just the same," he exclaimed, pointing to where the water and food bowls always stood. "And there's even a new cushion." Emily watched the scene from the doorway, her heart overflowing with gratitude. The house was different, yes, but better. Robert had thought of every detail during the reconstruction, from the state-of-the-art smoke detectors to the strategically placed emergency exits. "I think he likes it," Robert commented, stopping next to Emily. He had decided to stay for dinner, something that was becoming more frequent in recent weeks. Charlie stopped in the middle of the room, his snout raised as if to catch something in the air. His eyes fixed on the wall where the old family photo used to be, the one taken the day they brought Sam home from the hospital, with Charlie still a puppy sitting proudly next to the baby. "Oh, about that." Robert smiled, pulling something out of his work folder. It was a framed photo, digitally restored, the same image that the flames had destroyed. "I found an old copy in my archives." Emily picked up the picture frame with trembling hands. There they were, frozen in a moment of pure happiness, her holding newborn Sam, Robert with his proud smile, and Charlie, so small at the time, but already with that look of devoted protector. "I thought we'd lost that photo forever," she whispered. "There's one more surprise," Robert announced, turning to Sam. "How about we take a new photo? To mark this new beginning?" Sam's eyes sparkled. "Can we take it with Charlie's medal?" Minutes later, they were all positioned on the new sofa. Charlie, wearing his Medal of Valor, sat majestically between Emily and Robert, while Sam knelt in front of him, hugging the Labrador's neck carefully so as not to hurt him. "Say, family," joked Mrs. Rodriguez, who had been asked to take the photo. The flash went off, capturing a moment that said much more than words. Charlie, his scars visible but dignified, surrounded by the love of the people he had risked everything to protect. Later, after dinner, when Sam was already asleep in his renovated room, Emily found Robert on the balcony, watching the stars. "You've done an amazing job with the house," she said softly. "It was the least I could do," he replied, his voice laden with restrained emotion. "You know, Emily, losing almost everything in that fire made me realize how much I'd lost before, by choice." Charlie appeared at the balcony door, limping slightly but determined. He sat down between the two of them, as he used to do years ago, when they were a complete family. "He always knew, didn't he?" Robert continued, stroking the Labrador's ears. "He always knew what really mattered. While I was chasing promotions and status in Washington, Charlie was here, being the guardian I should have been." "You're here now," Emily replied after a moment. "That's what matters." In Sam's room, through the open window, they could hear the soft breathing of the sleeping boy. The night was clear, with no sign of the storm that had changed their lives weeks ago. "Do you think we could?" Robert hesitated, choosing his words carefully. Do you think we could try again? Not the way it was before, but something new. Something better. Charlie looked from one to the other, as if he perfectly understood the weight of that moment. His tail began to thump softly against the porch deck. Emily felt tears welling up in her eyes, but this time they were different from the ones she had shed in recent weeks. They were tears of hope, of possibilities. "One step at a time," she replied, her hand finding Robert's in Charlie's soft fur. The Labrador let out a contented sigh, as if approving of the decision. There, under the starry sky of Crestwood, a family was beginning to heal, guided by the unconditional love of a dog who had taught them the true meaning of loyalty and forgiveness. Charlie's scars told a story of bravery and sacrifice, but now they also symbolized something else, the possibility that even from the darkest ashes, something beautiful and new can blossom. And as the night progressed silently, the old Labrador rested among his humans, knowing that his most important mission had only just begun, that of keeping his family together, not out of duty or obligation, but out of the pure and simple love that had always defined him. Autumn arrived in Crestwood, painting the trees in shades of red and gold, bringing with it changes that went beyond the landscape. 3 months had passed since the fire, and the Henderson family's life was finding a new rhythm, smoother and more harmonious than before. Charlie, although still bearing the physical marks of his bravery, had regained much of his mobility. His morning walks with Sam, once a casual routine, had become a special ritual. The Labrador limped slightly, but his spirit remained unshaken, especially when he accompanied his little human to the school bus stop. "Did you know that Charlie was the subject of an essay at school?" Sam commented during one of these outings. "The principal said that our story teaches about courage and true love." Emily, who had accompanied them that particular morning, smiled as she watched her son talk about the subject with a mixture of pride and awe. The fire had changed Sam too. He was more mature, more aware of the value of the really important things in life. The most surprising change, perhaps, was Robert's increasingly constant presence. He had rented a house nearby, reducing his trips to Washington to the bare minimum. His mornings now often began in the Hendersons' kitchen, preparing pancakes while Charlie supervised hopefully, always on the lookout for the possibility of a sliver of bacon accidentally falling out. "Remember when you were a puppy and stole food off the counter?" Robert joked one morning as Charlie watched him cook. "Now there you are, all dignified with your medal, but still eyeing the bacon." The Labrador replied with a serene wag of his tail, as if to say that some things never change, like the love of bacon and family. The medal Charlie had received from the fire department occupied a place of honor in the living room, along with the new family photo and several framed newspaper clippings. Their story had inspired not only the local community, but people from all over the country. Letters arrived regularly, many from children telling about their own hero pets. One afternoon, while organizing these letters, Emily found something special, an invitation from the shelter where Charlie had been born. They wanted the family to take part in a special event about responsible adoption and the bond between humans and animals. "I think we should go," Robert suggested when she showed him the invitation. Back to where it all began. Charlie, who was resting next to the sofa, raised his head when he sensed the change in tone. His eyes, although older and wiser, still carried that special sparkle that Robert had noticed so many years ago in the shelter. "You know," Emily began, taking a seat next to Robert, "I never asked you why exactly you chose Charlie that day. There were other puppies, weren't there?" Robert smiled, lost in memories. "Yes, there were. But when I walked into that room, all the puppies came running, jumping, barking, except Charlie. He sat there, watching me with those intense eyes, as if he was assessing whether I was trustworthy." Charlie approached with a slight limp, laying his head on Robert's lap as he continued the story. "The volunteer told me that he was different from his brothers. While the others played, Charlie was always on his guard, protecting the little ones. It was as if he had been born a guardian." Emily reached out, touching the scars on Charlie's golden fur. And she was right. At that moment, Sam rushed into the room, carrying his newest drawing, a colorful representation of Charlie with angel wings and his hero medal. The Labrador immediately perked up, his tail thumping against the sofa in a joyful rhythm. "Look at this," Sam showed proudly. "Mrs. Peterson said we're going to have an exhibition at school with all the stories and drawings about Charlie. She said it's important to remember that heroes can take any form." Emily and Robert exchanged a meaningful look. The tragedy that had almost destroyed their lives had, ironically, paved the way for a cure that neither of them had believed possible. And at the center of it all was Charlie, their silent guardian, who through his unconditional love had not only saved Sam from the flames, but helped rebuild an entire family. Later that evening, while the family watched TV in the living room, Charlie mounted his usual guard. His scars, now a permanent part of his history, glowed softly in the lamplight. For the old Labrador, they weren't reminders of pain, but symbols of a love strong enough to stand up to fire. Sam fell asleep on the sofa, cuddled up between his parents, and Charlie watched the scene with satisfaction. His family was together, safe and stronger than ever. For him, there was no greater reward than that. The medal on his collar glittered, but Charlie's real prize was much more precious. It was the renewed love that filled that house, a love that he had protected even when all seemed lost. And as the night crept quietly over Crestwood, the old Labrador rested in peace, knowing that his greatest mission had been accomplished. A year has passed since the night of the fire. Winter had once again arrived in Crestwood, covering the town in a silent white blanket. In the Hendersons' house, now truly a reconstituted home, Charlie watched the snowflakes through the living room window, their reflection mixing with the Christmas tree lights. "Look, Charlie," Sam called out, holding up a special ornament, a miniature replica of the Labrador, complete with its Medal of Valor. "This one will be right in the center of the tree, where everyone can see it." Time had been kind to Charlie. Although his scars remained visible and his right paw still had a slight limp, his energy and devotion remained unwavering. His eyes, now with a white ring around the irises due to age, still shone with the same deep love as ever. Emily and Robert were working together in the kitchen, preparing Christmas dinner. Their reconciliation had been gradual, built on stronger foundations of mutual understanding and respect. The sound of their occasional laughter mingled with the aroma of cookies baking, a familiar melody that Charlie never tired of hearing. "You know what's funny?" Robert commented, while decorating cookies with icing. "I spent years chasing success in Washington, thinking I was building something important. But it took almost losing everything to understand where the real wealth was." Emily smiled, remembering how their lives had changed. The tragedy of the fire had become a catalyst for profound changes. Robert had finally accepted a position at a local firm, prioritizing time with his family over professional status. Emily had gone back to school, inspired to become a counselor for families in crisis situations. But perhaps the most significant change was the impact Charlie's story had on the community. The shelter where he was born had created a special program called Charlie's Guardians, dedicated to training dogs to be companions for children with special needs. Charlie's medal was no longer just an individual decoration, it had become a symbol of hope and transformation. Sam, now 8, had become a little ambassador for the animal cause. His essays about Charlie inspired a school project that connected students with local shelters, encouraging responsible adoptions and respect for animals. "Charlie," Sam called softly, sitting down next to the Labrador by the tree. "Did you know that because of you many other dogs have found families? Mrs. Rodriguez told me that in the last month alone, 15 puppies have been adopted because of your story." Charlie tilted his head, his wise eyes fixed on his boy. So many things had changed since that stormy night, but some remained constant, like the pure, unconditional love between a dog and his family. The doorbell rang, announcing the arrival of the guests for Christmas dinner. Soon the house was full, Mrs. Rodriguez with her famous apple pie, Captain Anderson from the fire department, Dr. Martinez and his family, and several neighbors who had become close friends over the past year. Charlie greeted each visitor with serene dignity, his medal shining under the Christmas lights. For many of those present, he was more than a dog, he was a living reminder that true love knows no bounds, fears no sacrifice, and has the power to transform lives. When everyone had gathered in the living room, Robert raised his glass for a toast. To family, he began, not just the one we were born into, but the one we chose and the one we built. And to our hero, Charlie, who taught us that sometimes guardian angels have 4 legs and a heart bigger than the world. Charlie, lying at Sam's feet, watched the scene with satisfaction. The scars on his body told a story of courage and sacrifice, but also of redemption and rebirth. Each mark was a testament to the transformative power of love, a love that had not only saved lives, but rebuilt a family and inspired an entire community. Outside, the snow continued to fall softly over Crestwood, blanketing the world in its silent purity. Inside the Hendersons' home, the warmth of love and gratitude warmed every heart present. And at the center of it all was Charlie, the faithful guardian, the silent hero, whose legacy of love would continue to inspire generations to come. Because some stories don't end, they live on forever in the hearts they touched and the lives they transformed. And the story of Charlie, the Labrador who faced the fire for love, was one of those eternal stories, a reminder that true courage is born of the purest love, and that the greatest heroes are those who love without limits and without conditions.